The scar on Maya Richardson's knee still burned on nights like this. A thin, angry line just below her left kneecap, it throbbed every time the city heat rose off the pavement and slipped through the half-open window of her apartment. Outside, Boston glowed in sodium orange and ambulance blue. Inside, the only light came from the television, flickering across her face. A talking head filled the screen, graphic bar reading controversial traffic stop sparks debate. Over his shoulder, grainy phone footage played in a loop. A black woman on her knees in the middle of a July street, hands bound behind her, head lifted, not quite bowed. The camera shook, zoomed, lost focus. Her face was blurred for privacy, but Maya did not need clarity to recognize herself. She knew the shape of that jaw, the way her shoulders squared, even while her skin blistered against the asphalt. The volume was low, but she did not need the sound. What she heard, what she always heard, was a different voice entirely. "Mommy, why is that lady on the ground?" 7 years old, high and confused and afraid. The boy on the sidewalk clutching his mother's hand while an entire block of houses watched from windows and porches and doorways. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence of that street had been louder than the officer's orders. Maya turned away from the screen and looked at her desk. Case files lay in uneven stacks, yellow tabs bristling like small, angry flags. Excessive force, unlawful stop, pattern practice investigation. For 15 years, she had read these stories in third person, under fluorescent lights, coffee in hand. Victim did this. Officer said that. She had highlighted, annotated, argued, always at a distance. Now, somewhere in a server at the Department of Justice, there was a new folder with her own name on it. Richardson, Maya. Incident report attached, body cam attached, medical photos attached. For the first time in her career, she was not the one holding the file. She was the file. Her laptop chimed softly. An email sat at the top of her inbox, subject line clean and clinical. Trial calendar update. Richardson v. Callahan, United States District Court, Eastern District. The words blurred for a second before she blinked them back into focus. Date, time, courtroom number. Her stomach tightened, part adrenaline, part dread, part something hotter and heavier that had been sitting in her chest since that afternoon. This was not just about her burned knees or one officer with a bad temper. It was about every time someone had told her the system worked, as long as you did everything right. She had done everything right. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, then curled into a fist. In a few weeks, she would walk into a courtroom where the man who ordered her to kneel would sit under oath. Sure of himself, backed by a union, a department, a culture that had protected him for 15 years. But this time, the story would not end at the curb. Maya let out a slow breath and glanced once more at the television. The clip played again, overexposed and shaky, that anonymous woman on her knees becoming an argument on cable news, a symbol, a debate topic. To everyone else, she was a blurred figure on a screen. To the little boy on the sidewalk, she was a question his mother could not answer. To Officer Derek Callahan, she had been another lesson to teach. To the federal court system, very soon, she would be something else. That day, they had forced her to kneel in the street. Today, an entire system would have to stand up in front of her. 3 weeks before anyone said the words Richardson vs. Callahan out loud, it was just another Tuesday morning. The smell of coffee and toasted bagels floated through the small kitchen while the news played on a tablet propped against the sugar jar. A shaky cell phone video filled the screen. Red and blue lights. A black man pressed against a squad car. An officer barking orders. The caption read, "Viral traffic stop raises questions." Zoe sat at the table in an oversized hoodie, curls piled on top of her head, eyes glued to the clip. She stabbed at her scrambled eggs without really eating. "They always get away with it," she muttered. Maya slipped her blazer on, smoothing the sleeve as she walked past. "You are supposed to finish your breakfast before you get outraged at the world," she said lightly. Zoe did not smile. "You know I am right. There is always an investigation. There is always a statement. Nothing actually happens." Maya poured coffee, listening to the familiar edge in her daughter's voice. It sounded a little too much like some of the people she faced across conference tables and courtrooms, people who had earned their cynicism the hard way. "The law works," she said, setting a mug in front of Zoe. "It is slow. It is messy. But it works. That is why we do what we do." Zoe looked up. That is why you do what you do. I just sit here and watch videos of people who look like us getting slammed on concrete. Maya felt that line land. She bent, kissed Zoe's forehead. One day, you will be the one writing the rules if you want to be. Until then, let me handle the concrete. Zoe shook her head, but her shoulders loosened a little. Just be careful, Mom. Cops do not care what degrees you have if they only see your skin. Maya's smile faded for half a second before she turned away to grab her briefcase. That is why we have laws, she said. So it is not about who sees what. It is about what we can prove. By 9, she was in a conference room on the 7th floor of the Department of Justice building, lights humming overhead, a projector glowing against a white wall. The slide at the front read, Maple Ridge Precinct Pattern Review. A map with red dots appeared. Stops. Complaints. Use of force reports. We are seeing a concentration of incidents right here, Maya explained, laser pointer circling a cluster of streets. Disproportionate traffic stops of Black and Hispanic drivers, higher rates of searches without corresponding arrest numbers. This is more than bad luck. Across the table, Samuel Price, a senior attorney with 25 years in the Civil Rights Division, leaned back in his chair. His tie was crooked. His eyes were sharp. These departments protect their own, he said. Do not think a clean report and a stern letter from D.C. will magically fix it. They will smile, nod, do a press conference, then go right back to business as usual. Maya met his gaze. That is why we do not send stern letters. We send consent decrees and federal monitors. Patterns like this are exactly what the statute was written for. Price sighed. I am just telling you, kid. You go after a department that thinks it is untouchable. You better remember they are not going to play fair. I am not asking them to play fair, Maya said. I am asking them to follow the Constitution. The projector clicked to the next slide, a photo pulled from a local newspaper. Officer Derek Callahan at a community day, kneeling beside a smiling little girl in a pink dress, handing her a sticker badge. The headline above it read, Community Hero Honored for Service. There were others. Callahan shaking hands with the mayor. Callahan at a charity barbecue. Callahan listed as tough but fair in a puff piece about crime reduction. On paper, he is exactly the kind of cop departments love, Maya said. High activity, high visibility, friendly with the cameras. And off paper, Price asked. She clicked again. Complaint logs filled the screen. 47 entries in 3 years. Same badge number, same officer. Later that week, under a hard blue summer sky, Derek Callahan rolled slowly through Maple Ridge in his cruiser, one elbow hooked out the open window. He watched a white teenage boy coast through a stop sign on a skateboard, earbuds in, shirtless. Callahan's eyes tracked him for a beat, then slid past. 2 blocks later, he saw a late model sedan at the curb, clean, shiny, with plates from a neighboring suburb, and a black woman behind the wheel talking on her phone. She wore a blazer in the wrong zip code. Callahan's gaze sharpened. He lifted his radio, checked the plate. Everything came back clean. He frowned anyway. What are you doing here? He murmured, more to himself than to the dispatcher. He made a mental note. Not a stop. Not yet. Just a pin in his internal map. Back in D.C., as the investigation deepened, someone from Maya's team leaned against the doorway of her office while she packed up for the day. One more thing, they said. You know this, but I am going to say it anyway. She glanced up, one brow raised. These field observations you want. Do not go down there alone. Let the team handle the on-the-ground stuff. You stay where you belong, in the big chair. Maya laughed softly, snapping her briefcase shut. I am not doing an undercover sting. I am just observing, driving the neighborhood, watching interactions. They folded their arms. You roll up in a rental car with that face and that skin in a precinct you are investigating. They will not see senior special prosecutor. They will see problem. Let someone else be the eyes. I will be fine, she said. I know how this works. When they left, the smile fell away. She sat for a moment, watching the light fade across the city skyline outside her window. The truth was, it was not bullets she worried about. Not really. It was the look. The one she had seen 100 times when she walked into a small town station with a federal credential around her neck. A flicker of annoyance, then dismissal. Black woman with an agenda. Get too angry in one meeting, raise your voice once, and suddenly you were not a lawyer with data and statute on your side. You were just another story they told each other after hours about the one from D.C. who came down here trying to tell us how to do our jobs. Sometimes it felt like 15 years of work balanced on the edge of a single moment of tone. One eye roll at the wrong time, one clip sentence, and everything she had built could be reduced to a stereotype in an instant. That was the fear that kept her careful, precise, controlled. By the time she pulled out of the DOJ garage, the sky was purple and gold. She merged into traffic, the weight of her briefcase on the passenger seat, the weight of the Maple Ridge file sitting somewhere behind her ribs. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared, distant but steady. A patrol car moved into her lane far back. Just another set of lights in a city full of them. Its bar on the roof was dark, no siren, no flash. Maya adjusted the mirror, then looked at herself for a heartbeat. I understand the law, she told her reflection. I belong to this system. Everything is under control. The patrol car stayed behind her, close enough to notice, far enough to ignore, following without a sound through the gathering dark. July 14th started like any other day on paper. At 9 in the morning, Maya stood at the whiteboard in a small conference room, running through timelines and witness lists with her team. Maple Ridge was just one bullet point in a long list of investigations. We can schedule site interviews for early next week, one of the analysts said. Local NAACP chapter is willing to host a listening session. Maya nodded. Good. I want community voices before we sit down with command staff. Someone else tapped a pen on the table. And the ride along, requests from patrol officers who claim they want to show us their side. We will vet those, she replied, carefully. The conversation drifted to other cases, internal emails, deadlines. By 10:30, the room was empty again. Maya gathered her notes, then paused on one line of her own handwriting. Maple Ridge, need eyes on daily traffic patterns. She looked out the narrow window at the bright blue sky. The forecast said 92. The air already felt heavy. She could send staff. She could wait for official channels. Or she could do what she had done a dozen times before when a file stopped feeling like numbers and started feeling like a knot in her chest. Go look for herself. At her office door, Samuel Price appeared as if summoned by the thought. You are not thinking of going down there alone, are you? It is an observation, she said. I drive a few streets. I see how they are policing in real time. No badge around my neck. No press. No letterhead. Price frowned. You know how this plays. You show up with a team, they roll out the red carpet and put their friendliest officers on their best behavior. You show up alone, they might put you on yours. Maya smiled thinly. I will stay in the car, Sam. I am not knocking on doors. He watched her for a long beat. These places protect their own. Do not start believing your title is body armor. She heard the concern under the gravel in his voice. I am just observing, she said. I know how this works. 2 hours later, she was on the highway with the windows up and the air conditioning humming. Her DOJ badge sat zipped in her briefcase on the passenger seat, out of sight, heavy as a stone. As she exited toward Maple Ridge, the scenery shifted. Shuttered storefronts, a playground with peeling paint, a line outside a discount grocery store. Ordinary American poverty under an ordinary American sun. She turned down one block, then another, watching. A cruiser sat at the corner of a liquor store, officer inside scrolling his phone. A black teenager crossed at the light, hood up against the heat, earning a long stare from behind that windshield. Nothing overt, nothing you could write in a complaint. Just 1,000 quiet calculations of who belongs and who is suspect. In her rearview mirror, a patrol car slid into view. White and blue, light bar dark, closing the distance with slow, deliberate ease. Maya felt the first flutter in her chest. She checked her speed. Exactly the limit. Turn signal used. Seatbelt on. Maybe he is just driving, she told herself. Just another unit on patrol. The cruiser stayed behind her through one turn, then another. When his lights finally flashed red and blue, she was less surprised than she thought she would be. She signaled, eased her sedan toward the curb, put the car in park. Hands on the wheel, visible. Engine off. The posture she had taught in community centers and church basements. Just another traffic stop, she whispered under her breath. I know what to do. The officer approached fast. No measured steps, no polite distance. He came in hot, jaw set, hand resting near his holster, out of habit more than need. License and registration. No good morning, no explanation. Not even a question mark at the end of the sentence. Maya swallowed. Her voice came out calm by force of training. "Officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for it slowly." "Is that all right?" he snapped. "Did I say you could move?" She froze. In that split second, she felt the weight of the briefcase on the seat beside her. Inside, the badge that changed everything in most rooms. Senior Special Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice. She could pull it out now. End the game. Watch his face shift from hostility to something brittle and careful. She knew exactly how that looked. She had seen it in a dozen station houses when they realized who she was. "If you show it, you will be fine," a voice in her head said. The other voice, quieter and older, asked a different question. "What happens to all the people who cannot pull out anything but a wallet and a prayer?" She had come here to see how the system treated a black woman in a car that did not seem to fit the neighborhood. A regular afternoon, a regular stop. This was the test. In the space between two breaths, she made the choice. She left the briefcase closed. "I am just trying to do what you asked," she said, keeping her hands on the wheel. "I want to get you my registration the way you instructed." "Get out of the car," he cut in. There was no reason, no probable cause stated, just the sharp edge of power used because it could be. Maya stepped out slowly, every movement deliberate. The heat hit her like a wall, July sun bouncing off pavement. She could feel sweat prick at the back of her neck under her collar. "Hands on the hood," he ordered. The metal was blistering hot. The contact burned her palms, but she said nothing. She had cross-examined officers who insisted this was standard procedure. She knew how every word out of her mouth could be twisted, how one raised tone could become resisting in a report. Then came the sentence that truly crossed the line. "Get on your knees, girl." The word girl landed harder than the heat. She had been called many things in her life, but in that moment it carried a whole history on its back. Not Ma am, not Miss, girl, beneath. Her face went hot, not from the sun now, but from humiliation that rushed up her throat and lodged there, a bitter taste she could not swallow. Her ears rang. For one dizzy instant she saw herself the way he must have seen her, not as Dr. Richardson with networks and titles, just a black body to be controlled in the middle of the street. "Neil," he repeated, "you hearing me?" On the edge of her vision she saw movement, a woman on the sidewalk with a little boy. The child stared, eyes wide. His voice drifted across the street, thin and high. "Mommy, why is that lady on the ground?" The mother did not answer. Her fingers tightened around her son's hand. She looked away. Maya looked down at the pavement, then at her own legs. She imagined saying no, imagined straightening her spine and refusing. She could see the next 2 seconds in horrifying clarity. The lunge forward, the hands, the weight. The cold report written later about non-compliance. She thought of Zoe at the kitchen table saying cops do not care what degrees you have if they only see your skin. This was the third choice, and the cruelest. "You can hold on to your pride and maybe die on this street," the quiet voice said, "or you can trade it for a chance to fight back later. Survive now. Justice later." Maya bent. The asphalt seared through her slacks as her knees met the ground. Pain shot up her legs, bright and immediate. Her throat burned with the words she did not say. She kept her eyes straight ahead, fixed on a crack in the pavement. Plastic bit into her wrists as he cinched restraints too tight. Fingers tingled, then numbed. His shadow fell over her as he shifted his weight. Already bored, already reaching for his phone. "Yeah, I am thinking tacos tonight," he said to whoever was on the other end of the line. "No, nothing serious, just teaching someone a little respect." The humiliation was a living thing in her chest, clawing and hot. But something else slowly rose beside it. The part of her that had lived in transcripts and evidence for 15 years clicked into place. She took in the scene with a prosecutor's eye. The patrol car number stenciled on the side, the badge on his chest, Callahan, the tiny digital clock on his body camera frozen in her mind at 14:47:33 when he gave the order to kneel. She heard the arrival of a second unit, the car door opening, a woman's voice hesitant. "Derek, maybe we should just cut short by his reply. I have got this. Secure the perimeter." Maya did not turn her head, but she caught a glimpse of the second officer as she moved past. Latina, early 30s. Name tag reading Rodriguez. Her eyes flicked over the scene, and for a heartbeat, they met Maya's. There was something there. Discomfort, doubt, a crack in the blue wall. Maya logged it. Every detail, every word, every flinch. She knelt on hot concrete, the skin on her knees blistering, her lungs filling with heat and shame and fury. The choice she had made sat heavy inside her, a weight she could not shift. Later, there would be body cam footage and expert witnesses and legal arguments. Later, people would call what happened that day a civil rights violation and a pattern and a case. In the moment, it was simply this: a woman on her knees in the street, learning in the hardest way that sometimes the decision to stay alive is the same decision that breaks your heart into pieces. The morning after, Maya woke to pain before she opened her eyes. A slow, throbbing burn in her knees. A tight ache around her wrists where the plastic had cut into skin. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and hissed, the skin under the bandages pulled, tender and raw. In the bathroom, she eased them off one by one. Angry blisters stared back at her, outlined in purple and red. She did not recognize her own knees. They looked like they belonged to someone who had fallen off a motorcycle, not to a woman who had obeyed every command in a traffic stop. A soft knock came at the door. Mom Zoe's voice. "Yeah, baby. You have been in there for a while. Are you okay?" Maya stared at her reflection. Her face looked normal. That was the strange thing. No bruises, no swelling. Just the eyes, a little too wide, like she was still listening for sirens. "I am fine," she said, forcing steadiness into her tone. "Just getting ready." There was a pause. "Mom, what happened yesterday? You came home late. You were quiet." Maya's hand tightened on the edge of the sink. A flash of heat on asphalt. "Girl, get on your knees." "Nothing happened," she lied. "Just a long day." "Go grab breakfast. I'll be out in a minute." Zoe did not move away immediately. "You always tell me not to bottle stuff up," she said through the door. "I know," Maya replied. Then softer, "I will tell you, just not yet." By afternoon, someone else had done the talking for her. On a neighborhood Facebook group 3 states away, a shaky clip hit the feed. Filmed from half a block back, zoomed in and out, it showed an indistinct dark figure kneeling in the street while a white officer stood over her. The caption read, "She must have done something." The video was reposted to Twitter, then Instagram. Comments bloomed underneath like mold. "Should have just complied. Play stupid games." Probably mouthed off. "This is what happens when you disrespect law and order." Mixed in were others. "This is disgusting. She is on her knees in business clothes. You really think this is about safety? If she was white, this would not be happening." Then the uglier ones, thinly veiled slurs, monkey emojis, references to welfare and fathers and neighborhoods. The kind of comments Maya had scrolled past in other people's cases while she sat in her office and promised them the law would cut through the noise. That afternoon at DOJ, the clip played on mute in the break room television. Kyron screaming viral traffic stop raises questions. A small knot of staff watched as they stirred sugar into coffee. "We do not know the full story," one of them said. People love playing victim these days. A couple seconds of video, and suddenly, everyone is an expert on policing. Maya had stepped in just in time to hear that last sentence. No one looked twice at her as she reached for the water pitcher, fingers white around the handle. She wanted to say, "That is me. That is my body on that pavement. That is not a performance." Instead, she poured water, nodded at no one, and walked out, the back of her neck burning. For the first time, she felt like a stranger in the building whose badge she had worn like a shield. Across town, the locker room at Maple Ridge hummed with a different kind of energy. Callahan sat on the wooden bench, unlacing his boots, while 2 younger officers listened. "Non-compliant driver," he said, shaking his head like he was the one who had suffered through something unreasonable. "Tinted windows, attitude from the jump. Started with questions about why I pulled her over. You know the type." "What did you do?" one of them asked, already half grinning. "Handled it," Callahan replied. "Got her on her knees where I could see her hands. Taught her some respect. Captain Morris walked by, file in hand." "That the one from yesterday?" "Derek, yeah," Callahan said. "Minor thing." Morris flipped through the first page of the report without really reading it. "Just write it up clean," he said. "You know the drill." Behind the station, in a small brick house 2 blocks from the stop, the woman who had walked past with her son the day before sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Denise Torres replayed the scene in her head, again and again. Her boy had asked why that lady was on the ground. She had said nothing, had pulled him along, heart pounding, eyes on the sidewalk. Now she searched for some number to call, some form to fill. Her thumb hovered over a tip line she had found on the city website. Then she pictured her name on a complaint, her address in a file, her son's face if anyone came asking questions. "I have got kids," she whispered. "I cannot get involved." She locked the phone and pushed it away, guilt sitting heavy in her chest like a second heart. In her apartment that night, Maya sat at her desk with a legal pad open. She wrote down everything she could remember in tight, neat lines. The exact phrases he had used. The patrol car number. The time on the dashboard when she pulled over. The time on the tiny glowing numbers of his body camera when he told her to kneel. She had read enough transcripts to know how this would go without proof. Her word against his. Respectable officer with 15 years on the force. Unknown black woman in a nice car. She pressed the pen so hard the tip tore the paper. Her email pinged. Subject line, Officer Callahan's body camera footage retrieved. Maya stared at it, the air in the room suddenly thin. The first wave of consequences had been silence and doubt and the easy cruelty of strangers. Whatever came next would not be quiet. The first time Maya watched the body cam footage, she did not sit behind counsel table or in a courtroom. She sat in a windowless DOJ conference room, the air conditioner rattling above her, the smell of stale coffee hanging over the long table. A tech hit play. On the screen, she saw her own car pulled to the curb, her own hands on the wheel. Her own voice, stripped of how it had felt from the inside. "Officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for it slowly. Is that all right?" There was no echo of the pounding in her chest, no visible tremor in her fingers. Just a woman following instructions. Then his voice, sharp and amplified through the speakers. "Did I say you could move?" Maya's jaw tightened. Across from her, two analysts took notes, faces carefully neutral. No one looked at her. They were trained not to. 4 minutes later, the room was silent except for the soft whir of the projector fan. On screen, she was still on her knees. "So," one of the analysts said quietly, "officer's account is false." Maya finished for him. Completely. They moved from that video to spreadsheets, use of force logs, stop reports. Every line with Callahan's badge number highlighted. 47 entries where he noted using what he called a compliance procedure. Kneeled suspect on scene for officer safety. 36 of those ended with no arrest, no citation, no referral, just released. Names and races were listed in small type. Beside each, a box marked race. Maya ran her finger down the column. Black, Hispanic, black, Hispanic, black. 43 out of 47. The pattern laid out in rows and columns looked obscene, like someone had taken a highlighter to a bad instinct and never stopped. "You all right?" Sam Price murmured later when it was just the two of them. She realized she was gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles were white. "I have to write the memo," she said. "We have to decide whether to recommend a full pattern practice action." Sam hesitated. "Do you want someone else to take lead on this one, given that I am in the video?" She finished. He did not say yes, but the weight of the answer sat between them. Conflict of interest, ethics rules, the technicalities of who signed which piece of paper. "You can recuse on the paper trail and still guide the ship," he said eventually. "We both know you built this case." That night, at her kitchen table, Maya wrote about herself in the third person. On July 14th, 2:47 p.m., complainant was stopped while operating a motor vehicle. Complainant complied with verbal commands. Officer Callahan escalated to prone compliance position without articulable safety threat. Her hands shook once. She stopped, waited for the tremor to pass, and kept going. She stripped out first-person pronouns, cut every word that sounded like anger, and replaced it with something clinical and dead. Objectively unreasonable, excessive under totality of circumstances, departure from department policy. When she finally pushed the laptop away, it was after midnight. In the next room, Zoe was long asleep. In Maya's head, the phrase "kneel," girl ricocheted against bone, refusing to quiet. Sleep, when it came, brought flashes. Asphalt, the sting of plastic at her wrists. The boy's voice. She woke with her heart racing, nails digging crescents into her palms. The investigation rolled forward. In a beige interview room 3 states away, she sat across from Dorothy Patterson, 68, retired librarian, her hands folded over her purse. He pulled me over for a taillight, Dorothy said. I did not even know it was out. Next thing I know, he has me on my knees on the sidewalk. I told him, I have arthritis, son. I cannot. Her voice wobbled. He said, if you can walk into your car, you can get down for me. My knees. They have not been the same since. Maya listened, throat tight. In a community center gym in Maple Ridge, she met Tyrell Washington, 16, skinny, eyes darting whenever the door opened. I was just riding my bike, he said. Same street I ride every day to my grandma's. He said I matched a description, made me get off the bike. Then he says, on your knees. What did you feel? Tyrell. He blinked, then looked away. Small, he said. Like I was in trouble for existing. I do not take that street anymore. If I see a car like his, I turn the other way, even if it takes me 10 extra minutes. In a therapist's office with soft lighting and a box of tissues on the table, Maya met Jasmine Torres, 19, nursing student, or she had been. He pulled me over for a broken light, Jasmine whispered, fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. He made me kneel on the median, cars flying by. I thought, if someone swerves, they are going to hit me. I was shaking so bad I could not breathe. He laughed. Now she could not drive on the highway. She could not sit in a car without checking the mirrors every few seconds. She dropped out of school halfway through the semester. I wanted to testify, Jasmine said, eyes wet. I really did, but I keep seeing his face. I cannot stand the thought of him looking at me again. Maya felt something crack open in her chest. For years, she had read stories like these as lines in affidavits, exhibits in binders, real but distant. Now across the table, the shaking hands and the way each person glanced at the door whenever footsteps passed made it undeniable. I'm sorry, Maya said quietly, not just for what he did, for how long we let him. In another part of the city, Officer Elena Rodriguez lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her husband slept beside her. The TV in the next room murmured about a case in Maple Ridge drawing national attention. She saw Maya on her knees every time she closed her eyes, heard herself saying, Derek, maybe we should, and then swallowing the rest when he cut her off. For weeks, she had told herself it was not her call. He was senior. He knew the policies. You did not survive in that precinct by second-guessing the guy who wore medals to the Christmas party. Still, when she opened her locker and saw Callahan's nameplate 2 doors down, her stomach knotted. You look like hell, he said one afternoon, half joking. You let the media get to you, or what? She managed a smile that did not reach her eyes. Just tired, she said. At home, when the news showed the clip again, her daughter asked, Mom, is that your station? Elena muted the sound. Do your homework, she said. In Callahan's house, the pressure rose in a different way. At the precinct, the union rep clapped him on the shoulder. We got you, Derek. Do not say a word to anyone without counsel. This is a witch hunt. They always go after the guys who actually do the job. He swallowed the comfort like a pill that only half dissolved. At home, his wife stood in the doorway of their bedroom, holding her phone. I saw the video, Derek, she said. That woman was in slacks and heels. She was not attacking you. You do not know what happened before they hit record, he snapped. You sound like those idiots online. His son, home from college, barely spoke at dinner. When Derek tried to start a conversation about baseball, the boy said, They are talking about you in my criminal justice class. The professor used your case as an example of what not to do. He pushed his chair back and left his plate half full. Still, Callahan told himself, they never really touch guys like me. Internal Affairs would do their performance. DOJ would puff up. Something would settle. It always had. Until the day he saw the headline, Civil Rights Lawsuit Filed, Richardson versus Callahan. The article mentioned federal court. It mentioned a seasoned civil rights attorney named James Wu representing the plaintiff. It mentioned the Department of Justice conducting a broader investigation into systemic misconduct at Maple Ridge. At her desk, Maya read the same article. Comments poured in beneath it. Community groups offered support. Black churches in the area announced prayer vigils. Civil rights organizations released statements. Her name was out there now, attached to the clip that had once blurred her face. There would be no pulling it back. That night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the hum of the vent, the only sound. Zoe had gone to bed after hugging her a little too long, like she was bracing for an impact neither of them could see. Maya pressed her fingertips lightly against the scars on her knees, then looked up at her own eyes. When I walk into that courtroom, she thought, what am I, victim, prosecutor, both? The thought terrified her. It also settled something deep inside. She squared her shoulders as if facing an invisible jury already there in the mirror. Scared or not, she was going. The first hearing was on the calendar. There was no turning this ship around. Either this case would become a model for how the system could answer for itself, or it would sink and take a piece of her faith with it. Maya took one last breath, held her own gaze, and turned off the light. By the time the clerk called the case, there was not an empty seat left in courtroom 4B. Reporters lined the back wall, their laptops open, fingers poised. A row of older black church ladies sat in their Sunday best, though it was a Tuesday. Hats tilted just so, eyes hard. A cluster of young activists in hoodies and t-shirts with slogans leaned forward in the gallery, elbows on their knees. Maya sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, face still. She could feel the weight of their eyes on the back of her neck, but she kept her gaze ahead. All rise. Judge Patricia Coleman took the bench, black robe settling around her like armor. After the formalities, defense counsel rose. The defense calls Officer Derek Callahan. He walked to the stand as if he owned the floor. Dress blues pressed sharp, metals catching the light, jaw clenched in righteous purpose. He raised his hand, took the oath, and settled into the witness chair like a man accustomed to being believed. Tell us what happened on July 14th, counsel prompted. Callahan's voice was steady. I was on routine patrol, he began. I noticed a vehicle with tinted windows and what appeared to be an expired tag. I initiated a standard traffic stop. The driver was immediately combative, refused to comply with simple commands, moved her hands around where I could not see them. He shook his head, the picture of weary professionalism. In those situations, I do not see color. I see compliance or non-compliance. My only concern is going home safe and keeping the public safe. Several jurors nodded slightly. When defense finished, James Wu stood. He walked to the center of the well, legal pad in one hand, pen in the other. Officer Callahan, he said mildly, you testified there have been some complaints about you over the years. Callahan lifted one shoulder. Cost of doing the job, sir. People do not like getting tickets. Would it surprise you to learn there have been 47 formal complaints filed against you in the last 3 years? A murmur rippled through the room. Complaints do not mean anything, Callahan said, a touch of defensiveness creeping in. Anyone can file one. They were all unfounded. Wu nodded as if that were interesting, but not yet important. Let us talk about your so-called compliance procedure, the one you say you used on Dr. Richardson. How many times have you ordered people to their knees? In the last 3 years, I do not keep a running tally in my head. We checked for you, Wu said. 47 uses of this procedure. Only 11 of those resulted in an arrest. He turned to the jury. That means 36 people were forced to kneel in public, restrained, then released with no charges. He looked back at Callahan. What did those 36 have in common? Officer, I am not sure what you are suggesting. Wu stepped closer. Out of those 47, 43 were black or Hispanic. The area you patrol is 60% white. Can you explain that discrepancy? Callahan's collar seemed suddenly too tight. I do not choose who I stop based on race. I respond to behavior. Behavior like driving a nice car in the wrong neighborhood, Wu said softly, or asking questions about why they are being stopped. Objection, defense snapped. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Coleman said, move on, Mr. Wu. Wu did, but the numbers hung in the air like smoke. The next witnesses built the fire. Dr. Thomas Carter, a forensic video analyst, walked the jury through frame by frame of the body cam and dash cam. Maya's hands visible, her voice calm. Callahan's voice rising in volume, orders contradicting each other, no sign of erratic movement or threat. In your professional opinion, Wu asked, does the video support Officer Callahan's version of events? No, Dr. Carter said simply. It contradicts it. Then came Dr. Patricia Holmes, a statistician from Georgetown. She spoke in clean, unadorned sentences about probabilities and distributions. The chance of this racial breakdown happening randomly, given the demographics of his patrol area, is less than 1 in 1,000, she concluded. This is not random. It is a pattern. Officer Elena Rodriguez sat where Callahan had sat, uniform the same, posture very different. She twisted her hands in her lap as Wu asked, "What did you see when you arrived on scene?" She was already on her knees, Rodriguez said, voice rough, hands behind her back. She was not resisting. She was not yelling. She was quiet. "Did you believe she posed a threat?" Rodriguez blinked hard. "No, sir, I did not." "Why are you testifying today?" "Because I should have said something then," she whispered. "I did not. I cannot undo that, but I can tell the truth now." Civilians followed. Beatrice Washington, who had watched from her porch. Marcus, the young man whose phone video had started it all. Denise, the mother whose son had asked why that lady was on the ground. "I did not know what to tell him," Denise said, tears slipping down her face. How do you explain to a child that someone in a uniform can do that to a woman in business clothes and nobody stops it? Piece by piece, the image of a single traffic stop dissolved into something bigger and uglier. During a break in the testimony, defense counsel tried to patch it together. He rose, voice edged with irritation. "Let us not forget," he said to the jury, "that Ms. Richardson is not an expert on police work. She is an ordinary citizen who felt embarrassed, inconvenienced, and now wants a payday. Her emotions are understandable, but they do not make her qualified to tell you how an officer should act in a split-second situation." Maya felt the words like a slap, more than any physical blow she had taken that day. Ordinary, inconvenienced. As if her entire profession did not exist. As if what happened to her was a scheduling error. Wu was on his feet before the echo faded. "Your Honor," he said, "I would like to recall Dr. Richardson to the stand for the limited purpose of establishing her qualifications." Defense scoffed. Qualifications Judge Coleman's eyes narrowed. "The request is reasonable. Dr. Richardson, please retake the stand." Maya walked up the aisle, each step measured. She sat, raised her hand again. And this time, when she swore to tell the truth, she felt the words land differently. "Mr. Wu," the judge said. Wu nodded. "Dr. Richardson, would you please state your full name and your professional credentials for the record?" She looked first at the jury, then at the gallery. Finally, her eyes settled on Callahan, sitting at the defense table, his jaw clenched, confusion furrowing his brow. "My name is Dr. Maya Elise Richardson," she said. "I hold a Juris Doctor from Yale Law School and a Ph.D. in Criminal Justice and Police Accountability from Harvard University." A low hum moved through the room. "For the past 12 years," she continued, "I have served as a senior special prosecutor in the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. My job is to investigate civil rights violations by law enforcement officers across this country." Wu's voice was quiet. "And, specifically, what have you been working on for the last 8 months?" Maya did not look away from Callahan. "For the last 8 months, my team and I have been investigating patterns of discriminatory enforcement and excessive force in the Maple Ridge Police Department, the precinct where Officer Callahan serves." The hum became an eruption. Reporters jerked upright. Someone in the back gasped. "Order!" Judge Coleman snapped, gavel cracking against wood. At the defense table, the blood drained from Callahan's face. The woman he had called girl in the street, the woman he assumed was powerless, was the same one whose name had been on the letterhead that kept him up at night. Maya felt none of the satisfaction she thought might come with that realization. If anything, a cold clarity settled over her, because for all those degrees, all those years in courtrooms and conference rooms, none of it had mattered on that asphalt. The system she served had not wrapped itself around her like a shield when he ordered her to kneel. It had watched in silence, just like the people on the sidewalk. Law was not a living thing. It was ink on paper until someone picked it up and used it. And men like Callahan had been using their power, unchecked, for a very long time. Judge Coleman cleared her throat. "Given Dr. Richardson's expertise and role in the broader investigation, I am prepared to permit limited questioning of the defendant by the plaintiff, in coordination with Mr. Wu." Defense sputtered in objection. "Overruled," the judge said. Maya stood. For the first time since that day on Maple Ridge, she faced Callahan without heat in her cheeks or pain in her knees, only purpose, Officer Callahan, she began, voice calm. During your testimony, you spoke about your years of service. You did not mention Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, did you? His eyes flickered. I do not know who that is. She is 68 years old, she said. You pulled her over for a broken tail light. You made her kneel on the sidewalk for 9 minutes. She has arthritis in both knees. She uses a cane. You wrote in your report that she was non-compliant. He swallowed. I do not remember every stop. What about Tyrell Washington 16? Riding his bike to his grandmother's house. You stopped him for being in a, quote, high-crime area. You made him kneel on gravel until his jeans tore. No response. And then there is Jasmine Torres, she continued, each name a nail. 19. Nursing student. You pulled her over for a broken light and made her kneel on a highway median while cars passed at 60 miles an hour. She begged you to let her stand. You laughed. Callahan's hand tightened around the arm of the chair. I do not recall that, he said, but the words came out thin. That is strange, Maya said softly, because she remembers every second. She remembers the sound of your boots on the pavement behind her every time she closes her eyes. She let the silence sit a breath too long. The jury did not look at Callahan. They watched her. You called this a compliance procedure, she went on. But the vast majority of the people you forced to their knees were never arrested, never charged, never found guilty of anything. She took one small step closer. This was not about safety. It was about reminding them who held the power. Callahan's earlier certainty had drained away. His shoulders sagged. The man on the stand now was not the confident officer from the morning news segments. He was smaller somehow, exposed under the bright lights. Finally, Maya drew a breath and let the words she had been carrying since July out into the open. When you forced me to kneel, she said, you thought you were teaching me a lesson. She held his gaze. You were, officer. You taught me exactly how dangerous unchecked power can be. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Somewhere in the gallery, a chair creaked. No one spoke. For the first time since he had taken that stand, Derek Callahan looked genuinely afraid. By the time closing arguments began, everyone in that courtroom knew the facts. What was left was what they meant. Defense went first. Richard Brennan smoothed his tie, but his voice had lost its early swagger. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, Officer Callahan has served this community for 15 years. 15 years of split-second decisions, of walking into danger so others do not have to. July 14th, perfect no. But the law does not demand perfection. It demands reasonableness. Do not judge a decade and a half of service by a few minutes of imperfect video. He sat down to a silence that felt like a held breath. 15 years, he echoed softly. That is what the defense wants you to remember. I want you to remember 7 minutes. He let the number sit. 7 minutes on hot asphalt. 7 minutes on her knees. 47 complaints in 3 years. 47 times he used this so-called compliance procedure. 43 black or Hispanic in a district that is mostly white. His voice hardened. This was not a bad day. This was who he chose to be. When he finished, Judge Coleman turned to Maya. Dr. Richardson, as the plaintiff, you may address the jury before deliberation. Maya rose. The room went very still. For 15 years, she said, I have sat where Mr. Wu is sitting, representing people who were hurt by the very people sworn to protect them. I believed them. I fought for them. Her eyes moved over the jurors' faces, lingering on the older black woman in the front row, the retired white teacher at the end, the man with a union pin on his lapel. But I did not understand. Not really. Not until the day I was the one on the ground. She named them. Dorothy Patterson, 68, who cannot climb stairs without pain now. Tyrell Washington, 16, who changes his route home to avoid patrol cars. Jasmine Torres, 19, who left nursing school because she cannot set foot in a parking lot without shaking. They are not numbers, she said. They are lives. And for years, when they said, he did this to me, the system answered, we find no wrongdoing. Her voice stayed steady, but the weight in it deepened. I'm not asking you to hate him. I am asking you to hold him accountable, because if a badge means never having to answer for what you do, then none of us are safe. The jury left. 3 hours later, they filed back in. On the count of unlawful detention, the foreperson read, we find the defendant liable. On the count of excessive force, liable. On the count of violation of civil rights under color of law, liable. Maya exhaled, a breath she felt she had been holding since the day on the street. Across the aisle, Callahan's shoulders sagged. The court awards the plaintiff $500,000 in compensatory damages, Judge Coleman said, and I am referring this matter to the state attorney general for review of potential criminal charges. Maya stood. Your Honor, if I may. At the court's nod, she said, my office has already prepared federal indictments, not just for Officer Callahan, but for 23 officers in his precinct whose records show similar patterns. This will not end at civil damages. 6 months later, in a different federal courtroom, Derek Callahan stood for sentencing in an orange jumpsuit. No medals, no pressed blues. You have been found guilty of multiple counts of depriving citizens of their constitutional rights under color of law, the judge intoned. This court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. His wife was not in the gallery. She had filed for divorce. His son did not come. Former colleagues who once slapped his back now avoided his name in public. He did not kneel. Federal marshals cuffed him at the wrists, not at the pride. But something in him bent anyway as they led him away. A man finally meeting the weight of what he had done. 7 minutes on her knees. 7 years behind bars for him. But the real price, Maya knew, was not measured in time. It was measured in every person who would never again accept a badge as proof of character, and in every officer who would think twice before using power as a weapon instead of a trust. A year later, the corner of Maple Ridge did not look like the place where a woman had been brought to her knees. The asphalt had been repaved. The cracked sidewalk was gone, replaced by raised beds of tomatoes and herbs in a small community garden. On the brick wall overlooking the intersection, a mural stretched 2 stories high, hands of every shade reaching upward beneath one word in bold white letters: dignity. Maya parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching a little boy water the plants while his mother read a flyer on a bulletin board. She recognized them only by the way he clung to her hand. Denise and her son. The boy who had once asked why that lady was on the ground now stood eye level with the raised beds. The Maple Ridge precinct operated under federal oversight now. Every use of force reviewed by an independent monitor, body camera footage auto-uploaded to outside servers. The kneeling compliance trick banned outright, not just on paper but in practice. Every recruit taught the case that killed it. In police academies and law schools, instructors now said the name Richardson versus Callahan when they talked about patterns, about bias, about what happens when the badge becomes a shield against accountability instead of a shield for the public. The people behind the file names had moved too. Jasmine Torres walked back into her nursing program after months of therapy. Shoulders still a little tense when she crossed a parking lot, but moving forward. Tyrell Washington started his freshman year at a state university, majoring in sociology, his name on the roster of a campus justice group that held forums on policing and race. Dorothy Patterson spoke at town halls now, her cane tapping in emphasis as she demanded better protections for the elderly and the poor. The arthritis still flared, but she no longer whispered her story. She carried a copy of the consent decree in her purse. Maya's own title had changed, Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. It sounded impressive in headlines, but when she looked at it on her office door, it no longer felt like the armor she once believed it to be. Justice, she had learned, was not just briefs and statutes and clean logic. It was choosing to walk back to the place where you had been humiliated and refuse to let it own only that memory. It was admitting that even the people who knew the system best could be crushed by it unless someone forced it to look in the mirror. One evening, as the sun dropped low, Zoe joined her on the couch, scrolling past an article about the case on her phone. "Mom," she asked, "if you could go back to that day, would you still kneel?" Maya looked at her daughter, at the girl who had once said they always get away with it. The answer did not come quickly. "I wish I did not have to," she said finally. No one should ever have to make that choice. She paused, feeling the old burn in her knees like a ghost. But if that is what it took to expose what he had done to so many others, if that is what it took to stop him, then I am glad I stood up afterward. Zoe nodded slowly, eyes wet but clear. In this country, Maya thought, consequences do not arrive just to punish. They arrive to strip away stories we tell about ourselves. They show who we are when we hold power and who we are when we are at someone else's mercy. One person may be forced to kneel on a hot street so that a whole department has to bow to the Constitution instead of their own habits. One woman's 7 minutes on the ground can change how a generation of officers is taught to think about the people in front of them. In a country where some are told to kneel just to be reminded of their place, sometimes the deepest justice is this. The one they force to the ground becomes the one who decides whether they ever stand in uniform again. If this story stayed with you, do not let it end here. Share it with someone who still believes their voice does not matter. Leave a comment, add your perspective, and subscribe to this channel for more true and inspired stories about ordinary Black lives demanding extraordinary justice. Your attention is not just support for a story. It is a small stand for the dignity it defends.